"Sir, please marry my mommy. She's all I've got left," begged the tearful girl to the cold CEO. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The snow was falling gently as the evening settled in. The busy streets of New York were cold, covered in a thick blanket of white. The streets were filled with the sound of car engines and the occasional honk, but it didn't seem to matter to the little girl standing in the corner of the sidewalk, hugging herself tightly for warmth. She was no older than 7, her face pale with worry, and her eyes filled with fear. In her tiny hand, she clutched a crumpled piece of paper, a last-ditch plea for help. Her name was Lily, and she had no one left but her mother. Her father had passed away 2 years ago, and since then, her life had been nothing but uncertainty and hardship. She was just a child, yet she had already learned the harsh realities of life. Her mother, the only family she had left, was struggling, working tirelessly but barely making enough to scrape by. Lily couldn't stand seeing her mother so worn out, so she decided to take matters into her own hands. She had heard stories of people who could help, powerful people with enough money to make a difference. And that's when she saw him, standing across the street, a man in a dark suit, exuding confidence and power. He was the type of man she had only seen in movies, someone who looked like he could change everything. Without thinking, she ran across the street, her heart pounding in her chest. The wind cut through the air as she approached him, her breath visible in the cold night. She wiped away a tear, looked up at him, and with all the courage she could muster, she spoke. "Sir, please, marry my mommy. She's all I've got left." The man, standing still and stoic, didn't react immediately. He seemed to look at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. His name was Alexander King, the CEO of King Enterprises, one of the most successful tech companies in the world. Cold, calculating, and focused, Alexander had always believed that emotions were a distraction, something to be avoided at all costs. But there was something about this little girl, standing before him, eyes full of hope and desperation, that made him pause. He had never been one to entertain such requests, especially from a stranger. Yet, he couldn't seem to shake the image of Lily's tear-streaked face, her voice trembling as she pleaded for him to marry her mother. Without knowing why, he found himself asking, "Why me?" Lily wiped her eyes, trying to find the right words. But all she could say was, "Because you can make her happy. She's always so sad, and I can't fix it, but maybe you can." The simplicity of her words hit him harder than he expected. Alexander felt a strange tug in his chest, a small crack in the wall he had built around his emotions. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know if he even believed in love or marriage anymore. But for the first time in years, he was unsure of his own feelings. Before he could say anything more, Lily turned and walked away, her small figure disappearing into the night. As Alexander stood there, he couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of something, a sense that perhaps, just perhaps, this was the moment that could change everything. He had always kept his emotions at bay, focusing solely on business. But Lily's words had unsettled him, and he found himself questioning everything he had believed in. As he walked back to his car, he couldn't shake the image of that little girl's face, pleading for something he had never considered. Could he really be the one to make a difference in her life? And more importantly, could he make a difference in his own? The next day, Alexander found himself unable to forget Lily's plea. He had never been one to make impulsive decisions, but this felt different. He needed to find her. He needed to understand why her words had affected him so deeply. And so, he began his search for Lily and her mother, not knowing that this search would lead him to a path of self-discovery and emotional healing he had never anticipated. As he followed the trail that would lead him to them, Alexander couldn't help but wonder, could this little girl, in her innocence, show him the value of family, of love, and of a life that was so much more than business and power? And could he possibly be the one to give her and her mother the happiness they so desperately needed? The next day, Alexander couldn't get Lily's tearful plea out of his mind. He had spent the morning in back-to-back meetings, his usual focus on business, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the little girl's face. Her words echoed in his head. "Marry my mommy, she's all I've got left." It wasn't the kind of request he was used to hearing, especially from someone so young. It was innocent, raw, and desperate, and for reasons he couldn't fully understand, it stirred something inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. He leaned back in his office chair, his gaze fixed on the city skyline outside his window. His life had been dominated by success, power, and control. He had built King Enterprises from the ground up, but at what cost? His personal life had become a void. His marriage had ended in divorce, and since then, he had kept his emotions at arm's length. Family, love, those were concepts that felt distant, but Lily's words challenged everything. He stood up abruptly, his decision already made. He needed to find her. He had to know more about the girl and her mother. There was a strange pull in his chest, a need to do something he had never done before, something beyond the boardrooms and the deals. He had to find out if her mother was really as sad as Lily had said, and if he could be the one to change that. After spending the day tracking down information, Alexander found himself standing in front of a small apartment building on the edge of town. It wasn't the kind of place he usually frequented. It was humble, a far cry from the luxury of his penthouse. He took a deep breath, his hand resting on the door handle of his car. This was it. He had no idea what he was going to say when he saw them. All he knew was that he couldn't ignore the pull he felt to make things right. He walked up the narrow staircase of the building, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. He reached apartment 3B and hesitated for a moment before knocking. There was a soft sound from inside, and the door creaked open. Standing in front of him was Lily's mother, a woman in her mid-30s with tired eyes but a warmth that radiated despite the exhaustion on her face. Her name was Sarah, and she had been struggling to make ends meet ever since her husband's sudden death. She hadn't expected visitors, certainly not someone like Alexander King. She blinked, clearly taken aback when she saw him standing there. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice cautious. "I'm looking for Lily," Alexander said, trying to sound calm despite the butterflies in his stomach. "Is she here?" Sarah's brow furrowed. "What do you want with her?" she asked, her protective instincts kicking in. Alexander hesitated, unsure of how to explain. He hadn't come to make any promises. He wasn't here to fix things, at least, not in the way that he was used to fixing problems. He was here because something inside him told him that this was important, that this was more than just a chance encounter. "I met her yesterday," he finally said. She asked me to marry you." Sarah's eyes widened in confusion and disbelief. "What? Why would she?" She started, but Alexander interrupted her gently. "She said you were sad, that you needed help, that she thought I could make you happy." Sarah's face softened as the weight of his words settled on her. She had been so focused on surviving, on getting through each day, that she had never stopped to think about how her daughter was perceiving it all. She had never stopped to think about the toll it had taken on Lily, the way she had seen her mother's pain and helplessness. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Sarah sighed, her shoulders slumping. "I'm doing the best I can," she said quietly. "But sometimes, it feels like it's never enough." Alexander nodded, his gaze sympathetic. He wasn't sure what had brought him here today, but as he looked at Sarah, he realized that there was more to life than just success and wealth. There was more to it than running a company or making millions. There were people who needed help, people who could make a difference if given the chance. "I know it's hard," he said, his voice softening. "But maybe you don't have to do it alone." Sarah looked up at him, her eyes full of doubt and uncertainty. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm offering you help," Alexander said, his words slow but firm. "I don't know what it looks like yet, but I think you and Lily deserve more. I think you deserve a chance to be happy again." Sarah stared at him for a long moment, unsure of what to say. She wasn't used to people offering help without strings attached. She wasn't used to people who genuinely cared. She was used to struggling, to getting by on her own. But Alexander's words seemed different, as if he was offering something real, something she had long given up hope on. "I don't know how this works," she said, her voice trembling. I don't know what you're asking for. Alexander smiled softly, his expression warm. I'm not asking for anything, Sarah. I'm just offering you a chance. A chance for things to be different. And in that moment, Sarah realized that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she had thought. As Sarah stood there, the weight of Alexander's words settling into her chest, she felt a flicker of hope that she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. It was strange, unfamiliar, yet undeniable. She glanced down at Lily, who had been quietly watching the exchange from the doorway. Her daughter's hopeful eyes met hers, and Sarah couldn't help but wonder if this was the beginning of something new, something better. You don't have to do this, Sarah said, her voice shaky, but filled with a soft resolve. I don't know what I can offer in return. We're just struggling, trying to get by. Alexander looked at her with a kindness that almost seemed out of place for someone with so much wealth and power. Sometimes the best thing we can offer is the chance for someone to be part of something better, he said gently. I'm not asking for anything in return, Sarah. I just think you and Lily deserve more than what life has handed you. Sarah shook her head slightly, unsure if she believed him. She had been let down so many times before, her dreams dashed by the harsh reality of life. She had learned to survive, but never to truly live. But there was something in Alexander's tone, something that made her want to believe, even if it was hard. The idea that someone, anyone, could truly care about her and Lily without expecting something in return was almost impossible to grasp. I'm not used to this. I've never asked for help before, she admitted, her voice low. I don't know if I even deserve it. You do, Alexander replied firmly, his gaze steady. You and Lily both deserve to be happy. You don't have to do everything alone. Sarah looked at Lily again, her heart aching as she thought about the weight her daughter carried, even at her young age. Lily had always been the one to comfort her, to wipe away her tears when things felt too heavy to bear. Sarah had tried to keep a brave face for her, but she was exhausted. What are you asking? Sarah finally asked, her voice a whisper, barely able to believe the words coming out of her mouth. Alexander took a deep breath, as though preparing himself for the next step. I'm offering you an opportunity, he said, his voice calm and reassuring. I can help you with more than just money. I can help you both find a path out of this struggle. Give you the chance to live a life where you don't have to worry about where your next meal is coming from, or how you're going to pay rent. But this isn't just about finances. It's about helping you find the space to heal, to dream again, and to have a life that's full of possibilities. Sarah blinked, her heart racing, her thoughts swirling. She had never imagined that someone like Alexander King, a powerful CEO who could have anything and anyone, would be standing in her apartment, offering to change her life. I don't know what to say, she murmured, overwhelmed by the enormity of what he was proposing. I didn't even know where to start, what to ask for. How can we accept something like this? One step at a time, Alexander said softly. We can start by getting you the help you need now, finding a way to make things easier, to get you back on your feet. And after that, we can talk about long-term solutions. But for today, just know that there's more for you and Lily. You don't have to carry everything by yourself anymore. Sarah felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but this time they were tears of relief. The weight she had carried for so long, the constant battle of keeping everything together, started to feel a little less heavy. She didn't know how she could ever repay Alexander for his kindness, but she knew that, for the first time in a long while, there was a glimmer of hope. Lily walked over to Alexander, her small hand reaching up to hold his. She looked up at him with a mixture of admiration and trust. You really think Mommy can be happy? She asked, her voice soft but filled with longing. Alexander smiled down at her, his heart warming at the pure innocence in her eyes. I believe that everyone deserves a chance to be happy, Lily. And I think your mommy deserves that chance too. Sarah stood there, watching the interaction between the two, and felt a stirring in her heart. Maybe, just maybe, there was something to this offer. Maybe there was a way for her and Lily to have the life they had dreamed of. I don't know what the future holds, Sarah said finally, her voice steady but still filled with emotion. But I'm willing to take that first step. For Lily, for me, I'm willing to try. Alexander nodded, a quiet smile spreading across his face. That's all anyone can ask for, he said. One step at a time, As Sarah closed the door behind them, the sound of Alexander's footsteps fading away down the hallway, she looked at Lily and took a deep breath. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. The journey ahead would be uncertain, but for the first time, there was a light at the end of the tunnel, and that light was something she wasn't facing alone anymore. Weeks passed since that fateful day when Alexander had made his offer to Sarah and Lily. During this time, the weight of his decision slowly began to settle into his daily routine. The more time he spent thinking about them, the more he realized that it wasn't just a business transaction he had initiated. It was the beginning of something deeper, something that was slowly transforming his life. Sarah had reluctantly accepted his offer, and while she was still cautious, there was no denying the sense of relief she felt each day. Slowly, Alexander had helped her secure a better-paying job, one that allowed her to pay off her mounting bills. They had moved into a small but comfortable apartment, far better than the cramped, run-down place where they had been living. But even with these changes, Alexander couldn't help but feel there was more he needed to do. Every time he saw Sarah smile, every time he saw the hope beginning to return in Lily's eyes, he felt an unfamiliar pull in his chest, one that made him want to be more involved, to offer more than just financial support. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Alexander found himself in his penthouse, staring out the window, his mind wandering. He had always prided himself on his control, his ability to maintain a distance from people, especially when emotions were involved. But everything had changed since he met Sarah and Lily. The person he had become over the years, focused solely on business, power, and success, now seemed like a shadow of who he could be. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of his phone buzzing on the desk. He glanced down at the screen, seeing a message from Sarah. It was brief, but it made his heart race. "Can you meet us at the park tomorrow? We have something to show you." Alexander felt a surge of curiosity, wondering what it could be. Without hesitation, he replied, "Of course, I'll be there." The next day, he found himself walking through a small park, the cool breeze brushing against his face. It was a quiet spot, filled with trees and benches where people came to relax. But today, it felt different. Sarah and Lily were sitting on a bench near the fountain, and when they saw him approaching, they both stood up, smiling. Lily ran toward him, her small hands holding something tightly. "We made this for you," she said, her voice filled with excitement. Alexander knelt down to her level, his eyes curious. "What is it?" he asked gently. Lily opened her hands, revealing a small wooden box. She handed it to him, and as he took it, he saw a piece of paper inside. It was a drawing, a simple sketch of a family, with Sarah in the middle, holding hands with Lily, and a figure beside them, drawn in bold lines, clearly meant to represent him. It wasn't a perfect drawing, but the innocence of it hit Alexander in a way he hadn't expected. He looked up at Sarah, his voice soft. "You didn't have to do this." Sarah smiled, her eyes filled with emotion. "It's not just the drawing, Alexander. It's the way Lily has changed since we met you. She's been asking about you every day, wondering when we'll see you again. You've made a bigger impact than you realize." Alexander felt a lump form in his throat, and for the first time in a long while, he was unsure of what to say. "I didn't know I meant that much," he said quietly. Sarah looked at him, her gaze steady. "You've given us more than just a chance at a better life. You've given us hope, Alexander. And for that, I'll always be grateful." Alexander stood up, his mind racing. He had never expected to be part of something like this, to be someone who was relied upon, who had the power to change lives in ways beyond his wealth. He had always focused on creating success in business, but this was something entirely different. "I don't know what the future holds," Alexander said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I want to be part of it. I want to be part of your future, of Lily's future." Sarah looked at him, her eyes searching his face. For a moment the world seemed to pause, and in that instant, Alexander knew he was offering something that went beyond his initial help. He wasn't just helping them survive anymore. He was offering them the possibility of a new life, one that could include love, family, and real happiness. Lily tugged at his sleeve, breaking the moment. "Will you come see the art show with us next week?" she asked excitedly. Alexander smiled, his heart light with affection for the little girl who had brought so much change into his life. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," he said, his voice full of warmth. As they walked through the park together, Sarah by his side, Lily skipping ahead, Alexander realized that he had come full circle. What had started as a simple act of kindness had grown into something far more meaningful. He had found a family in the most unexpected of places, and in the process, he had rediscovered a part of himself he thought he had lost forever. The following week, Alexander found himself standing in front of a modest gallery, its doors inviting but simple. The air was cool, the city's hustle and bustle fading as he stepped inside, his heart unexpectedly racing. He had been to countless high-profile events, but this one felt different. This was not about business, not about deals or clients. It was about Sarah, Lily, and the life they were building together. Sarah had invited him to this art show, something she had been working on in her spare time since she had found her new job, and Lily was beside her, eagerly pulling him toward the entrance. "You promised," Lily reminded him with a grin. Alexander smiled, bending down to her level. "Of course I did. I wouldn't miss it for the world." As they entered the gallery, Alexander was taken aback by the beauty of the space. The walls were lined with art, each piece vibrant with emotion, each one a testament to Sarah's creativity. Her work was raw, filled with emotion, and it made Alexander realize just how much she had hidden beneath the surface for so long. The world she had shared with him, the struggles, the resilience, the love for her daughter was now on display in the form of colors, shapes, and strokes of paint. Sarah stood proudly near one of her largest pieces, a painting of a mother and daughter, holding hands, surrounded by an array of bright and warm hues. The piece was simple but powerful, capturing a sense of hope and the strength of the bond they shared. Alexander was deeply moved. He had seen Sarah's strength firsthand, but this was her soul on display, unguarded and open. "This is incredible," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Sarah blushed, a slight smile on her lips. "I never thought I'd be able to share this with anyone," she confessed. "But you made me believe that I could." Lily beamed proudly, her hand tugging at her mother's sleeve. "See? I told you he'd love it." Alexander looked at the two of them, realizing that this was what he had been missing in his life. This connection, this raw, unfiltered love and support, was something he had never fully experienced. He had spent years building an empire, but none of that compared to the simple beauty of the love that Sarah and Lily shared. As they moved through the gallery, Sarah introduced him to a few people she had met through her job, some of them fellow artists and others who had helped sponsor the event. Alexander was struck by the warmth of the people she had surrounded herself with. They weren't the high-powered executives or investors he was used to. These were people who genuinely cared about each other, about building something together that was meaningful. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was part of something real, something grounded in emotion and human connection, rather than just numbers and strategy. As the evening drew on, Sarah and Lily were busy talking with the guests, and Alexander found himself standing alone for a moment, looking at the painting of the mother and daughter. He couldn't help but feel a growing sense of gratitude for what had happened since that first fateful day when Lily had asked him to marry her mother. It wasn't just about the money or the help he had offered. It was about the change in him, the way his perspective on life had shifted. He realized that the power and success he had spent so much of his life pursuing were meaningless without the kind of love, connection, and family that Sarah and Lily had shown him. Sarah walked up beside him, a soft smile on her face. "You look deep in thought," she said, her voice gentle. "I was just thinking about how much everything has changed," Alexander replied. "When I first met you, I never imagined I'd be standing here, in a place like this, surrounded by people who care about each other. It's different. It feels like I've finally found something worth investing in, something real." Sarah's eyes softened, and she reached out, placing her hand on his arm. "You've done more than just help us," she said. "You've shown me that there's more to life than just surviving. You've given us the chance to live again." Alexander looked down at her, his heart swelling with emotion. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected to become so attached, so connected to them. "I'm glad," he said quietly. "I'm glad I could be a part of this." Lily came running over to them, her excitement bubbling over. Mom, look! The art dealer said they want to buy your painting, she exclaimed, practically jumping up and down. Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. What? They want to buy it? She asked, her voice full of awe. Yes. Lily nodded enthusiastically. They said it's perfect for their new gallery. Sarah looked at Alexander, her eyes brimming with gratitude. I can't believe this, she whispered. Alexander smiled, his heart full. I always knew you had talent, Sarah, he said warmly. And now the world is starting to see it too. The evening ended on a high note, with Sarah's painting being sold, and Alexander, for the first time in a long time, feeling truly content. As he walked with Sarah and Lily back to their car, the city lights sparkling in the distance, he realized that this was what life was really about, finding connection, healing, and being part of something bigger than himself. He didn't know what the future would hold, but for the first time, he felt ready to face it with Sarah and Lily by his side. As the weeks went by, Alexander found himself spending more and more time with Sarah and Lily. It was a relationship that had grown deeper with each passing day. It was no longer just about helping them financially or providing support. It had become something more. It had become a bond, a connection that he hadn't anticipated, and with every day, it felt more like a family. It was a feeling he had pushed aside for so long, focusing all his energy on his career, his wealth, and his company. But now, with Sarah and Lily, he was beginning to realize that there was so much more to life than he had ever allowed himself to see. One evening, after dinner, as they sat on the couch in their cozy living room, Lily turned to Alexander with a serious expression on her face. Are you going to stay with us forever? She asked, her eyes wide with curiosity and a hint of uncertainty. Alexander blinked in surprise, taken aback by the question. It was a question he had never thought to ask himself. He had been so caught up in the whirlwind of his life, and the changes that had come with it, that he hadn't considered what his role in their lives truly meant. Sarah, who had been sitting beside him, looked at Lily with a smile that was both gentle and knowing. Why do you ask, sweetheart? She asked softly, brushing a strand of hair behind Lily's ear. Lily shrugged, her small hands clasped in her lap. Because you and Alexander are always together now, she said, her voice almost too mature for her age. And I want to know if he's going to be part of our family forever, like he promised. The words hit Alexander like a wave, and for a moment, he was speechless. He had never promised anything, not directly, but Lily's innocent belief that he was already part of their family touched him in a way he couldn't fully explain. Well, Lily, Alexander said after a moment, his voice gentle, I think that's something we all have to figure out together, don't we? Sarah turned to him, her eyes full of warmth. You don't have to make promises, Alexander, she said softly. We're just happy you're here. That's enough for us. Alexander looked at Sarah, his heart swelling. He had never imagined that he would find this kind of peace, this kind of belonging, after so many years of being alone, focused solely on his career. But here he was, sitting with them, feeling like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The following weeks brought new challenges and new joys for Sarah, Lily, and Alexander. Sarah's art continued to gain recognition, and with each new project, she grew more confident in her abilities, more certain of her future. She had found not just a career but a passion that she had long buried under the weight of life's struggles. Alexander was proud of her, watching as she blossomed. But more than that, he felt proud of himself. He had been a part of this transformation, had helped her see that she could have it all: success, love, and happiness. One day, after Sarah had completed a new piece for an upcoming exhibition, she turned to Alexander with a thoughtful expression. I've been thinking, she began, her voice quiet but filled with determination. Maybe it's time for me to take the next step. I want to open my own studio. I want to teach art to others, share what I've learned, and give back. Alexander smiled at her, his heart full. You're going to be amazing, he said, his voice sincere. You've always had the talent, Sarah, and now you have the confidence to make it happen. Sarah's eyes glistened with emotion as she reached for his hand. I couldn't have done it without you, Alexander, she said, her voice trembling slightly. You've given me so much more than just financial support. You've given me belief in myself, in my future. Alexander squeezed her hand gently, his own emotions rising. You did it all yourself, he said softly. I just helped you see that you could. They sat in silence for a moment, holding hands, the weight of their shared journey sinking in. It wasn't just about their individual successes anymore, it was about building a life together, one where they supported and encouraged each other. It was about family in all its forms. As the months passed, Alexander's relationship with Sarah and Lily deepened further. It was no longer just about what he could give them. It was about the love and connection they shared. One evening, as they all sat together at the dinner table, Lily turned to Alexander again, her small voice breaking the comfortable silence. "So, are you going to marry Mommy?" she asked, her face earnest. The question took Alexander by surprise, but it was a question he had been asking himself for some time. He looked at Sarah, who was watching him with a soft, expectant smile. The love he felt for them both had grown over time, and it was in this moment, surrounded by the warmth of their home, that he realized what he had been missing all along. He didn't need to think any longer. "Yes," he said, his voice full of certainty. "I want to marry your mom, Lily, and I want to be a part of your family. Forever." Sarah's eyes welled with tears, and Lily jumped up from her seat, throwing her arms around Alexander's neck. "Yay!" she exclaimed. Alexander held her close, his heart full, his life finally complete. The journey that had started with a simple request from a little girl had led him to a place of peace, love, and belonging. As he looked at Sarah, her smile shining brighter than he had ever seen it before, he knew that this was just the beginning of their story, a story of family, love, and the happiness they had all found together. Months passed, and Alexander's life had changed in ways he never thought possible. What started as a simple act of kindness had evolved into something far greater, an undeniable bond, a family that he could never have anticipated. He had once believed that success and wealth were the keys to happiness, but now, with Sarah and Lily, he understood that true fulfillment came from connection, love, and the shared moments that made life meaningful. The wedding day was fast approaching, and Alexander felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He had never envisioned himself as the kind of man to settle down, to build a family, but here he was, standing on the edge of a new chapter. The engagement had been simple, intimate, and full of love, with Lily bouncing around, excited about everything, and Sarah's eyes full of tears, a reflection of the emotions she had been carrying for so long. As the day of the wedding drew closer, the couple spent every moment they could together, preparing for the life that lay ahead. Sarah continued to focus on her art, building her studio, and teaching others. Her confidence had grown in ways Alexander never thought possible, and every time he saw her, he was more in awe of the woman she had become. He had always known she was strong, but now, he saw her as a force to be reckoned with, no longer defined by her past struggles, but by the bright future she was creating for herself and Lily. They had also started making plans for their new life as a family. Alexander knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but for the first time, he felt ready to face whatever challenges came their way, with Sarah and Lily by his side. On the eve of their wedding, Sarah and Alexander found themselves alone in the quiet of their apartment. The hustle of the world outside seemed so distant, and for once, Alexander felt a deep sense of peace. He sat down beside Sarah, taking her hand gently in his. "Are you nervous?" Sarah asked, her voice soft, as she looked at him with a playful glint in her eye. Alexander smiled, his heart full. "A little," he admitted, squeezing her hand. "But more than anything, I feel ready. Ready for this. Ready for you. For us." Sarah's smile softened, and she leaned in to kiss him. Her touch tender, as though everything they had been through had led them to this very moment. "You've made me believe in things I never thought possible, Alexander," she whispered against his lips. "You've shown me that love can heal, that it's never too late to find happiness." Alexander closed his eyes for a moment, taking in the gravity of her words. "I've learned more from you than you'll ever know," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I never thought I needed anything more than what I had, but now I know I needed you. I needed this. I needed a family." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with the weight of truth. Sarah rested her head on his shoulder, and they sat in silence for a while, the comfort of each other's presence speaking louder than words ever could. The next day, the wedding was everything they had dreamed of and more. It was a small ceremony, surrounded by close friends and family, in a garden filled with flowers that seemed to bloom just for them. Lily was the flower girl, her smile brighter than ever as she held Sarah's hand and walked down the aisle. The moment Alexander saw Sarah in her wedding dress, looking as beautiful as he had always imagined, he felt his heart swell with love and gratitude. He had been given the greatest gift, the gift of love, the gift of family, the gift of a second chance at happiness. As they exchanged vows, Sarah's voice trembled with emotion as she spoke of her love for him and the life they were about to build together. "I never thought I would find someone who truly saw me," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "But you, Alexander, you saw me for who I really am. You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself, and because of that, I'm standing here today, ready to take this step with you." Alexander's eyes filled with tears as he took her hands in his voice steady but full of love. "Sarah, you have made me believe in something greater than myself. You've given me a purpose, a family, and the love I never thought I deserved. I promise to love and cherish you, to be there for you and Lily, no matter what life brings our way." The crowd wiped away tears as the couple sealed their vows with a kiss, and in that moment, Alexander knew that everything he had been through, the struggles, the fears, the doubts, had led him to this very moment, to the love he had found with Sarah and Lily. They had truly become a family, and for the first time in his life, Alexander felt complete. As they walked down the aisle together, hand in hand, with Lily running ahead, laughing and full of joy, Alexander realized that this was just the beginning. They had found their happiness, their purpose, and together, they would face whatever challenges life had in store for them. With Sarah and Lily by his side, Alexander knew that anything was possible, and that love, true love, was the greatest gift he could ever receive. As the months passed, Sarah and Alexander's life continued to blossom in ways neither of them had anticipated. They settled into a routine that, while still filled with the busy demands of life, now included moments of joy, laughter, and warmth. Alexander's initial nervousness about his new role in their lives had faded, replaced by a sense of certainty. He no longer felt like an outsider. He was part of their world, their family. Sarah's art studio had flourished, and she was now teaching local workshops, helping others find their voice through creativity, just as she had done for herself. Her confidence had grown with every passing day, and Alexander couldn't help but feel proud of the woman she had become. He had watched her transform from a woman who had struggled to believe in herself to one who was now inspiring others, creating something meaningful. Lily, too, had continued to blossom in her own way. The once shy, uncertain girl who had asked Alexander to marry her mother was now a confident and curious child, full of life and hope. She had become the glue that held them all together, her infectious laughter filling their home, her sense of wonder reminding them all of the simple joys in life. Alexander and Sarah had learned to navigate their new life together, with all its challenges and rewards. They still had their moments of doubt. But now they faced those moments with strength, knowing that they had each other to lean on. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Alexander turned to Sarah, his eyes soft with affection. "I was thinking," he began, his voice thoughtful, "about how much has changed in such a short amount of time. When I first met you, I never imagined this. Never imagined us. I just wanted to help you, to make your life easier. But now, I can't imagine my life without you and Lily." Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with love. "I know what you mean," she said, squeezing his hand. "I never thought I'd be here either. I thought I was too broken, too lost. But you made me believe in something I hadn't believed in for years. You made me believe in myself, in us." Alexander kissed her forehead gently, his voice filled with emotion. "You did all the hard work, Sarah. You found your way back to who you really are. I just gave you a little nudge." Sarah laughed softly, shaking her head. "I don't know about that. You gave me more than a nudge, Alexander. You gave me a chance to live again." It was in that moment that Alexander realized something important, something that had been growing inside him for a long time. It wasn't just that Sarah had given him a family. It was that together, they had created something beautiful, something stronger than either of them could have done on their own. They had built a foundation of love, trust, and respect. And it had turned into something that neither of them had thought possible. They had both been lost, in different ways, but now they had found each other, and in doing so, they had found their way. Their life together had become a journey of rediscovery, of rediscovering what mattered, of rediscovering the power of love, of rediscovering family. "What do you think the future holds for us?" Sarah asked, her voice full of curiosity. Alexander looked at her, his gaze steady, full of warmth and certainty. "I think the future holds whatever we choose to make of it," he said. "As long as we're together, we'll face it head-on, no matter what comes our way." Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude for the man sitting beside her. "I'm glad it's with you," she whispered. "Me too," Alexander replied softly, his hand gently caressing hers. "I never thought I needed anyone before. But now, I can't imagine life without you." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of their journey together settling around them like a warm embrace. It was a quiet moment, but it spoke volumes. They had faced challenges, but they had faced them together, and that had made all the difference. The love they shared was not just something that existed in the big moments, it was in the small moments, too. It was in the way Alexander looked at Sarah, the way Lily laughed when she told jokes that didn't make sense, the way their home felt like a safe place, full of warmth and laughter. And as they sat there, the future ahead of them, they both knew that no matter what came their way, they would be okay. They had each other, and that was all they needed. The journey they had taken had been unexpected, but it had led them to a place of peace and love, and that was more than either of them had ever hoped for. Together, they were a family, and that was all that mattered. As the years went by, the life Sarah, Alexander, and Lily had built together only grew stronger. What began as a journey of unexpected love and connection had transformed into something enduring and beautiful. The family they had become wasn't just one of circumstance. It was one of choice, built on love, trust, and shared experiences. Sarah's art studio continued to thrive, and she had expanded it into a community space where artists could gather, share, and inspire each other. She had become a mentor, not just for those looking to find their creative voice, but for anyone who had lost their way. She had a gift for seeing potential in people, something that had always been inside her, but had been buried under years of struggle. As Sarah's success grew, so did her sense of purpose. She no longer felt like she was living in the shadow of her past. She was standing tall, living fully in the present, and building a future for herself and Lily. Lily, now a teenager, was thriving too. The shy, uncertain girl, who had once asked Alexander to marry her mother, had grown into a confident, intelligent young woman with big dreams of her own. She had inherited her mother's artistic talent and had begun to find her own voice in the world of painting, encouraged by both Sarah and Alexander to pursue whatever made her happiest. As a family, they supported each other through everything, from the smallest challenges to the most monumental milestones. Alexander, too, had changed over the years. He had let go of the need for control, the need to always be the one who fixed everything. He had learned, through his love for Sarah and Lily, that sometimes the greatest gift you can give is simply being there, offering your support, your presence, and your heart. He had become a different man, not defined by his wealth or success, but by the family he had chosen, the love he had found, and the life they were building together. One evening, as the family sat around the dinner table, laughter filled the air. They were sharing stories from their day, the little moments that made life special. Alexander looked at Sarah, her face glowing in the soft light, and he couldn't help but think about how far they had come. He had never imagined this life, never imagined how much it would change him, but now, as he looked around at the woman he loved and the daughter they had raised together, he knew that this was exactly where he was meant to be. "You know," he said, breaking into the conversation, "I never thought I would be someone who could have it all: success, love, family. I spent so many years thinking that power and wealth were the most important things. But then I found you, and everything changed. I found the things that really matter." Sarah smiled, her eyes filled with love as she reached across the table and took his hand. "You're right," she said softly. "None of this would have been possible without you. But more than that, none of this would have been possible without all of us. We built this together. We are a family, and that's all that really matters." Lily, who had been quietly listening, nodded in agreement. "It's true," she said, her voice filled with conviction. "Family is everything. It's not about what you have. It's about who you have." Alexander smiled at Lily, his heart swelling with pride. "You're growing up to be a wise young woman," he said. Lily grinned. "I get it from my mom," she teased. The family shared a laugh, the sound of their joy echoing in their home. It was a simple moment, but it was a moment filled with everything that mattered. Alexander had once believed that success and power were the most important things in life. But now, he understood that the true meaning of life was in the people you love, the family you build, and the joy you find in each other's company. As he looked at Sarah, and then at Lily, he realized that he had everything he had ever needed. It wasn't about the wealth or the company he had built. It was about the love they shared, the life they had created together, and the future that lay ahead of them. Together, they had faced the challenges of life, and together, they had built something far more valuable than any business empire. They had built a family, and that family was everything. The years had flown by, but each one had brought them closer, had brought them more love, more happiness, and more purpose. And as they sat around the dinner table, sharing laughter and stories, Alexander knew that their journey was just beginning. They had created something beautiful, and they would continue to build it together for the rest of their lives. With Sarah and Lily by his side, Alexander knew that nothing could stand in their way. Together, they had found the happiness they had all been searching for, and that happiness would last forever.